All right. So today we're going to finish up our discussion of political parties. We'll talk quickly about their functions, and then we'll go into a little bit more in-depth discussion of third parties. Okay. I know that we've hit on them at various times. You have your FRQ tomorrow. Okay. What you will find if you had looked at your FRQ questions, one of them closely relates to what I'm going to be talking about today. That's not a hint, that's just a statement of fact. Okay? I'm not saying that that's going to be one of your questions tomorrow, but what? No. Okay. The hint is that it's one of the 8 that I gave you. Yes, yes.
Well, you have too many tardies to be rocking out here. He's gonna have it done by the end of the day.
What?
He's gonna take it off.
Oh no, it's been all weekend.
What? Are you jealous, Christian? Because he looks like a European soccer player. And I know that's probably like one of your career goals in life, is to go play for Manchester United.
Right? I'm really jealous.
Okay. So listen, one of the functions of political parties, and this obviously is more of a historical function, it doesn't mean that it does not still happen today. But one of the functions is the idea of nominating candidates. Okay? It used to be that you would have caucuses, only people that had real high political efficacy generally participated in caucuses. Then you would go to the nominating convention, and the party would nominate its candidate. That gave significant control to the party. That doesn't necessarily happen anymore. Okay? With the advent or the popularity of primary elections now, a lot of that nominating process is actually taken out of the hands of the individual. Okay? Coupled with that, because we have primary elections now, and we've talked about this, right? Candidate-centered campaigns. Okay? This lessens the importance of fundraising and spending money on campaigns, because so much of it now goes to the individual rather than the party. Okay? Political parties, one of their functions is to register voters, believe it or not. That is a purpose or a point of the party, especially with the Democratic Party. Okay? And it's especially true of the Democratic Party, not because the Democratic Party is somehow better, but because the Democratic Party recognizes that those people who are not registered, okay, the majority of unregistered voters, if you get them registered and you can actually mobilize them and get them to a poll, the majority of those people would vote for the Democratic Party, right? Because for the most part, our people who are not registered tend to be minorities and lower class socioeconomically, all right? And we know that those are two of the sort of bread baskets for the Democratic Party. Okay, so the Democratic Party does this frequently. All right. They do provide simplification for voters. I will be honest with you, when I was your age, when I voted in my very first elections, they used to actually mail to people's houses a little booklet that was basically what they called a voter guide. Okay, and it would give you information about all the candidates. It did it. I mean, obviously, if it was coming from a party, and sometimes it was, it would be a little bit biased, obviously, to that individual party. You could get them, though, that were not party-specific, but they provided you with basically a sample ballot and information about all candidates at all levels. If you actually sat down and read the thing, okay, and then filled out the little sample ballot on election day, you could go in and vote in like 45 seconds. Wow, like 3 minutes. Right? Okay, but it simplified the process and it provided a lot of information, because we've talked about this before, right? No disrespect to any of you, because I'll admit that I have done this from time to time. Okay, when you go to cast your vote in the 2020 presidential election, some of you will go in and vote for president and House Representatives and Senate and these seats that you know and that you pay attention to, right? And then it's going to get down to like municipal county judge, and you're going to be like, I don't know. I'll vote for that guy. I like his name, right? Or I'll vote for her because Girl power. Like what? Like you vote for reasons that don't necessarily make any sense. What?
Do you have to vote like all the way down the ticket?
No, you could actually stop at any point in time that you wanted to, right? And that might not necessarily be a bad idea, right? Like if you were just completely oblivious, probably not a bad idea. Now that being said, is you will find parties attached to a lot of those people. So again, if you know that you identify more as a Republican or a Democrat or Libertarian or Green Party or whatever, you could cast a vote in that manner. All right. Let's see, where are we at? In terms of providing information for voters, hopefully we all recognize that all of like the advertisements that you see on television now are all pretty much negative, right? So sadly, when you look at the actual advertising aspect of elections and what political parties are doing, it really has ceased to be about the issues anymore. Because it's a candidate-centered campaign, we now attack basically the credibility of the people. All right. When we look at this map, anybody find we can read a legend on a map, right, Will?
No?
So you can read a legend on a map, right? You know what a legend is?
Yeah.
Okay. This. Right? Also known as a key. Okay? If we look at this, do we find anything that we think is understandable or anything that we might look at in this and be like, wow, that's actually really surprising?
California with the low turnout.
And that is surprising or not surprising to you?
Surprising.
Why?
Because like California has like such a strong image of like Democrat.
Okay, you're absolutely right. And does your vote matter in California?
Oh yeah.
Why?
I mean, it's probably gonna go Democrat either way, just like Texas is gonna go Republican.
Okay, so then we can actually say that Texas and California having low voter turnout, that actually isn't surprising then, is it? Right? Because in reality, California is going to vote for the Democrat and Texas is going to vote for the Republican. Oh well, who cares? Okay?
About Florida, though, they're a swing state.
What?
About Florida, they're a swing state.
That's one that you should find surprising. Okay? Florida would be one of those states where your vote matters immensely, yet Florida has relatively low voter turnout. Okay? And so we've talked about this, the idea of swing states and how much your vote matters in some of those places, right? And I mean, when you look, a state like Pennsylvania, which flipped and went for Trump, relatively low voter turnout. And if Clinton had gotten more people out to vote, maybe she wins. Now, this is obviously not from this year, not from 2012, or excuse me, 2016, but it is sort of historically accurate. Okay. Political parties, one of the key purposes today is their goal is to unify sort of diverse interests, right? To create some sort of coalition where they're bringing people together. You want another name though? Okay. So when we're talking about diversifying interests, or unifying diverse interests, excuse me, what we're talking about is this ideology of political parties where they need to bring together sort of all kinds of different things that people care about or that matter to them, right? Because hopefully we recognize as we start to awaken politically, okay, that you kind of lean toward one party or another, yes? Does that necessarily mean that you agree with everything within that party? Absolutely not. Okay? In fact, the vast majority of you will find that there will be individual aspects of various parties that you completely do not agree with. Okay? Yet, just like we did that little activity with the food, right? You're willing to swallow something that you don't actually care for, and in order to get everything else that you do want. Okay? So, while this is the idea, there is sort of a negative aspect to this as well. Okay? And that is that in order to appeal to so many people, you basically have to dumb down your message and not really take a strong stance on anything anymore. Okay, because the moment that you take a strong stance on anything, you start alienating people. And political parties cannot afford to alienate people, right? Parties are supposed to act as moderating influence on government. Alright, so what do I mean when I say moderating influence? What does moderate mean? Anybody? Give me an antonym of the word moderate. Extreme, thank you. Okay? So when we look at our political spectrum, the extremes are the ends. Right? So extremes are Rick Santorum and Bernie Sanders. Okay? Moderates are those people in the middle. And theoretically, right, parties are supposed to be a moderating influence on our government because they are supposed to bring everything into the center. Okay? That way you appease your sort of extreme side a little bit without completely alienating everybody on the opposite side. Okay? So what you see is that they bring in moderate candidates for the most part. It's part of the reason why the Democratic Party did not want Bernie Sanders to be the candidate. They wanted somebody that was more moderate, right? One of the major problems with Republicans over the last, really 2 decades, is that the Republican primary process has basically boiled down to who can get the furthest right. Right? And if you can get the furthest right, you win the primary. Well, then what happens? You've just shown yourself to be an extremist. You can't get back to the middle, and it's part of the reason why Republicans are losing now. Okay? Because they cannot be that moderating influence, and instead they are sort of extreme. Okay? However, because of hyper-pluralism, this doesn't necessarily work anymore, right? So, theoretically, right, in addition to providing the moderate candidates, they should bring about some sort of unity within government. Okay, so that operates as a sort of check on the checks and balances system. Okay, because there are checks and balances. Obviously, a Democratic president could overturn the actions of a Republican Congress. All right. If you have unity within the party, theoretically, Donald Trump will not veto any legislation passed by his Republican Congress, right? Okay. So theoretically, parties do provide sort of unity within government and the ability to actually get things accomplished. In reality, in this day and age, right, between hyper-pluralism and split-ticket voting, we don't get a lot done anymore. Okay? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay? On some level, our government should be very slow to act. We don't want them to be overly reactionary. We don't want government to be passing laws rapidly, right, in order to sort of bring about change that may not be necessary. Okay? Okay, they provide patronage. This shouldn't come as a shock to you, right? I mean, look at Trump's White House. How many Democrats did he appoint to positions? Anybody know?
0.
1. Alright, anybody know who the one Democrat was? I'll give you a hint. He's already been fired.
He was.
Yeah. Flynn was a Democrat. He's basically the only Democrat Trump appointed. Okay? So there are instances in which parties do provide patronage. Obviously, like Reince Priebus got a job. He was the head of the Republican National Committee. Okay? He was head of the RNC. Betsy DeVos got a job. She gave a lot of money to the Republican Party. Good for those people. Okay? On the bright side, most positions though now are filled by Civil Service Reform Act. Okay, so they're not, I mean, outside of those top level positions, they're nonpartisan in the way that they function. Okay. Political parties are supposed to inform the public through their platform, although in reality, how many of you have ever read a party platform? How many of you really know what a party platform says? How many of you, take a wild guess on the number of pages of a party platform?
400. 2,000.
Okay, roughly 50 to 75, probably somewhere in that range. Obviously, they differ from convention to convention, okay, but they're relatively extensive, all right? And again, part of that is the idea of being rather large. In fact, when you look at the Republican or the Democratic Party, their platforms are really long. If you look at like third-party platforms, not nearly as long. All right, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So parties provide loyal opposition. Okay, obviously this is something we see today. Republicans and Democrats won't work together with one another. In fact, we didn't even get a honeymoon period with Trump. Right?
Did you want one?
Based on the look on Melania's face most days, I'm going to go with no. I'm going to go that honeymoon was probably not fun.
Oh my god.
And then political parties are agents of socialization, right? So political socialization. Okay? And then finally, a linking mechanism between the people and the government. And again, one of the key aspects of sort of our democracy is it's very difficult, especially once you look at the size of this country now. And you're talking about 330 million people, and there's 535 representatives in Congress when you include the Senate. And that's incredibly small. So your ability to actually influence anything that goes on or to even participate in a significant or meaningful manner in politics is incredibly minute. All right? But parties provide that opportunity to link. So if you actually really do care about politics, like in earnest, you could join a party, actually become an active member of that party, sort of move up the ranks, and theoretically, by the time you're in your 40s or 50s, right, or maybe 30s if you're really good, you might be able to influence what's going on. All right. Okay. Now, our third party sort of ideologies here. All right. So I've told you over and over and over again that the third party is a wasted vote. Yes? Okay. So here's what we're going to talk about. First, we need to understand the types of third parties that exist. Okay? Because not all third parties are the same. And in reality, all I really care about here are the top two. Right? So those that are based on some sort of doctrine. Right? That would be like the Communist Party. Yes, there is a Communist Party of the United States. It's existed for roughly 100 years. Okay? The Libertarian Party. Okay? That is a doctrinal party. Okay? They have a general philosophy that governs them in dealing with a wide variety of issues. Okay? Next, you have single issue or issue-oriented political parties. I actually found out this morning when looking at this, I knew that there was a marijuana party. There are actually two. I don't know why they differ. I don't know why they're not the same party. I would have to look up their individual platforms. But let's be honest, both of those parties probably only generally care about one thing. The legalization of marijuana. Alright? Finally, you do get parties third parties that will sprout up, that will be sort of candidate-centered parties, or they organize themselves around a strong central figure. They tend to not last for very long at all, right? The Bull Moose Party, which was Teddy Roosevelt back in the 1912 election, I think. right? Doesn't last for very long. Perot's Reform Party doesn't last for very long either. And so now, if we understand the types of third parties that exist, and I keep telling you that a vote for a third party is a wasted vote, why do we have so many? And in reality, we have, I mean, there's like 24 third parties in the United States at any given time. Right? Why are there so many? What?
They don't like the leading to it. They didn't agree with some of the political aspects.
Well, they don't agree with some of the political aspects, but like we said a minute ago, you're, in all likelihood, you're going to identify as either a Republican or a Democrat, but you're not going to agree with all aspects of your party. Right? Okay? So it's more than that. Okay? Obviously, they're not really there to win elections. In fact, they almost never win elections. I mean, we have, what, 2 independents currently sitting in the Senate. And I don't know anymore. A couple of years ago, there was a libertarian in Congress. I'd have to look. I haven't looked at all the details of the 2016 election to see who got in and who got out. But it's very rare. Only other instance I can really think of is Jesse Ventura, who was the former governor of the state of Minnesota, right? And he was Reform Party or American Independent or something like that. Okay? And I'm not gonna lie, the fact that it was Minnesota and his previous profession probably helped as well. Anybody know what he was before he was a politician? Anybody know who Jesse Ventura is?
He was an actor. Or a wrestler.
That's what he was. He was a like WWE like fake professional wrestler. Now he has like a show on the History Channel that's all about like conspiracy theories. He's kind of crazy. He's a little weird. I'm going to assume from his wrestling career, he's probably sustained a lot of concussions. And probably shouldn't be, you know, in the limelight. But hey, it's America. What are you going to do? Okay? So, the number one function of third parties, really, okay, is generally to try to address some sort of issue or ideology that they want to see become prominent within America. It's not a matter of having that ideology win, to use Donald Trump's term, okay, but rather to have it become prominent in terms of the political conversation in the United States. And when single issue parties do that, and they do it successfully, okay, that party will get swallowed up by one of the 2 big parties. Okay? And the real example of this would be the Populist Party from like 1896. Right? They came up with basically an economic plan, right, which was William Jennings Bryan and the Cross of Gold. Do you remember that from A-Push?
Yeah.
Vaguely. Okay. William Jennings Bryan actually eventually runs again for president as the Democratic candidate. And because the Democratic Party is going to swallow that ideology up and try to use that to increase its base and try to become more successful. Okay? The other thing that they can do is they can actually greatly influence the outcome of presidential elections. Right? The election in 2000 and the election in 1992 are probably 2 real good examples of this. Ralph Nader, the Green Party candidate in the year 2000, took votes from Al Gore. Votes that probably would have led to Al Gore being elected or being successful in his bid for election in 2000. 1992, Ross Perot got 19% of the popular vote. I mean, 19%, that's huge. Okay, that is a significant total. And that 19%, a significant percentage of that would have come from George H.W. Bush. Right, thus leading to the election of Bill Clinton. Alright? Yes, sir.
They got 19%. They're supposed to get like funding.
He did. '96, and he actually took funding instead of Ross Perot was like filthy rich, like Donald Trump rich. Okay, and so he self-funded in '92. In '96, he took the government subsidy, and his percentage dropped down to like 8%. And then he didn't run in 2000. Alright. So some of the obstacles, we know that the single-member district here is a huge part of it. I mean, we say that we have a tradition of two parties. That's a true statement, and that makes it I don't want to say impossible, but difficult for a third party to sort of rise up and overtake one of the two. And we haven't seen really a new dominant party since 1860 in the Republican Party. Alright, I mean, since that point in time, it's really been the Republicans and the Democrats. You know, maybe with the exception of populism in 1890, Bull Moose Party, which garnered some votes. And then the Libertarian Party, bless their little hearts, they're trying so hard now. And I'll be honest with you, I thought at one point when Donald Trump got annihilated in the election, because I thought that was going to happen, I thought there was a chance that the Republican Party would splinter and sort of die as a result of having nominated Trump, and the Libertarian Party might have taken its place. That's probably not going to happen anymore. Alright. So single-member districts we went over, that's that little activity we did on the board where I showed you all of those different animals and we whittled it down to 2 and the inevitability of the way we elect people. We remember that. Alright. And then the Electoral College, obviously because of the manner in which we conduct the Electoral College, that's a hindrance to third parties as well. And getting candidates on the ballot is a hindrance. To actually be on the ballot, it varies from state to state. You saw a little video about that, about the number of signatures that you have to get. You actually have to pay a fee in order to have your name on the ballot. If you want to be an official write-in candidate, you have to pay a fee even for that to not have your name on the ballot, but just have your votes counted. Alright? Third parties have significant difficulty in obtaining money, in large part because they're just not well known at this point. They can't get the 5%, which prevents them from any sort of government subsidy in terms of elections. They don't get any media coverage, right? The amount of time that Gary Johnson actually spent on television in the last year was astounding and practically unheard of. And we saw last week with the Ross Perot article that they can't get on the debate stage even, right? I mean, that's all Gary Johnson really wanted, right, was to be on the debate stage so that he could basically try to pass himself off as a sane alternative to 2 crazy people, right? And so that sort of goes hand in hand with the media coverage, all right? Impact on parties on government real quick, alright? With Congress, whichever party is in control of Congress, they control the committees. So the chairman is a member of the majority party. They get all the leadership positions. Everything in Congress right now is all run by Republicans. Every committee has a majority of Republicans on it. Every committee is chaired by a Republican, etc., etc. And most of the congressmen or most of the staffers for a congressman are partisan, especially when you consider that most of Congress is safe seats, right? So like, there's no point in Pete Olson having Democrats on his staff because that position will always belong to Republicans, right? Even when Pete Olson retires, his staff will not necessarily retire with him. The new congressman will take over Pete Olson's staff, but the new congressman will be a Republican. In which case they would want a Republican staff. Alright? With the executive branch, we talked about this, any sort of political appointees, so the White House staff as well as like cabinet level positions are generally partisan. Alright? Alright, so that goes through that. The judicial branch, again, very partisan. Obviously, Donald Trump was not going to nominate well, I don't want to say obviously, because I can never figure out what that man does. But generally speaking, Republicans are not going to nominate Democrats to the bench. Democrats are not going to nominate Republicans to the bench. You see that change from time to time. You will also find, and we'll talk about this in more depth when we get to the judicial branch, there are instances in which judges sort of evolve politically over the course of their tenure, because some of them will serve for 30 plus years, right? And so the way that they are when they're 50 is not necessarily how they are when they're 80 politically as well, right? So you'll see that from time to time. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop there.